So another very important type of semantic analysis is the type analysis. So before we talk about type analysis, what is a type? This is a very interesting question, and there is actually no one answer to what is a type, but different programming languages have used types in different ways. And here are some common things among all these different usages of types. Firstly, a type is intended to specify properties of an object or something else, right? And for example, the property could be what are all the set of permissible values for this particular object, all right? So that would define the type of that particular object. So for example, if something is of type bool, then the permissible values are true or false or 0 or 1 or something like that. Or a type could basically encode what are all the operations that are permissible on a value. So in other words, how should a value be interpreted? And one way to kind of represent how a value could be interpreted is to restrict the operations that can be used on that particular value. So for example, if it's a string value, then it shouldn't be, for example, multiplied with any number, because why would anybody want to multiply a string value with something else, right? So that's just common sense, common wisdom that we want to capture using our type system. Okay, and these types could be either inbuilt in the language, so they are actually defined by the user. For example, the int, float, bool, etc. in C or C++, or they could be user defined. And so examples of user defined types are structs in C or classes in C++, in which case you could say that this is a new type. You can create your own new type, and then you can say that this is, and then you can put some restrictions on those types too. For example, these are all the things that can be accessed. These are the state that it maintains, but this is the state that can be accessed. These are the methods that can be called on it, whether it can be copied or not, what operations are permissible using operators, for example, etc. So those kind of things, you're just really creating user-defined types in that case. Okay. So in general, types restrict the set of legal programs. So if I look at the universe, so I use a Venn diagram here. It's a funnily created Venn diagram because it has these strange shapes of sets. But I guess I'm going to explain why I use these strange shapes. But let's say this universe denoted by this black rectangular line is the set of all parsable programs. Among these are some programs which is a subset of this is all the well-scoped programs. So the programs that obey all the scoping rules. And the idea here is that, if I ever make a mistake, I'm likely to basically be in the neighborhood. So let's say this particular program here is a well-scoped program. But let's say I made a small mistake in my program, then most likely, with a very high probability, I'm going to end up in this space, and that would be a non-well-scoped program. And so these rules are basically developed so that small errors can be caught early, because it is very common to make programming errors, especially when you're developing large software. And so these kind of semantic analysis checks prevent these errors by flagging these errors very early. So just as you are writing the code for just-in-time compiler, for built-in editor compilers, or as soon as you compile it, you find the error. You don't have to wait till that particular point, till that code actually executed. So the rationale for actually using these weird shapes is basically to show that if you make any small error, then you are going to likely go out of this particular set. Similarly, a subset of all the well-scoped programs is all the well-typed programs. And once again, I use this funny amoeba-like shape to represent that if you make a small error, which is an inadvertent error, then you would if you were actually trying to write a well-typed program and you made a small random error, inadvertent error, then you're going to very likely end up with a program that is not well-typed. And that's a good thing, because then the compiler will immediately be able to tell you. As opposed to, let's say you made a small error and it was still a well-typed program, and then the compiler would say it's all okay. And it's only when you actually run the program that you find out that something wrong, right? And that's not a good scenario. It's a much better scenario if you make some small errors and the type system semantic analysis is able to catch that error. And that's the purpose of having these kind of semantic analysis rules, so that we can kind of catch errors early. So higher level languages typically have stronger, by stronger I mean stricter type systems, right? So what do I mean by that? Now let's take an example to understand that in a bit more detail. So consider this particular assembly statement: add register R1, register R2, and put the result in register R3. Now, what are the types of these registers? Assembly language is one of the most low-level languages that you can imagine, and so it has the most permissible type system, in the sense we don't care whether R1 is representing an integer or a Boolean value. We also, in fact, it's also possible that R1 is actually representing a string which is less than or equal to 4 bytes in length, right? So assuming that R1 is 32 bits long and let's say a character is 8 bits long, then R1 could actually represent a string, a null terminated string, which could be either 0, 1, 2, 3 or 4 characters long, right? Or maybe not 4, but at least 0, 1, 2 or 3 characters long. And so, and that's perfectly okay. So R1 could be a string and R2 could be an integer, and still this particular statement is a legal statement because I'm just adding a string to an integer to get something else. Maybe I want to interpret it as something else. So really, I mean, at the assembly level, I don't really care what is present in this, what is the interpretation of these particular registers. And in other words, the types are basically very generic. In fact, the only types that we can think of here are that it's a sequence of bits, or it's a vector of bits, or also called a bit vector. So each of these registers is a bit vector, a 32-bit bit vector, let's say. And I don't really care what is the higher level interpretation of these bit vectors. For example, whether it's an integer, a Boolean, a string, or whatever it is, or a float, right? I don't really care. And so this is a very low level language, and it is a very permissible type system, because I'm just looking at using bit vectors, and I can do anything with those bit vectors. I can add them, I can have logical operations on them, etc. Whatever I like. Okay. So, however, let's look at a higher level type system. For example, if I look at, let's say, a language like C++ or something like that, in that case, I would have types. For example, I could have a type called string. It could be a user-defined type, for example. And I could say that, okay, addition to a string is illegal. Now, once again, I mean, it's possible that internally the string is still being represented, and let's say it's a small string, then maybe it's still being represented as a sequence of 4 bytes. And so it can actually fit in a register. But now, if I cannot ever use the plus operator on that particular object, so anything that is a string should not be operated upon using the plus operator or the multiplier operator, because it seems like that's not the right interpretation of a string. And that's also because why will anybody want to interpret a string as something that can be added to? And so the idea of using types here, and to use a type called string and then disable some operations like plus on that string, is to basically catch common mistakes. So this is, there could be a typo, there could be some misunderstanding of variable names or something like that, and that is causing this particular mistake, and such common mistakes should be immediately caught, because such programming patterns are very, very rare. All right, so that's basically the idea. So anything that's very rare, why do I let's build a type system to basically rule out those rare scenarios, so that if the programmer actually makes an error that actually looks like that rare scenario, then we basically say no, that's not even allowed. Okay. So that's the good thing about using a types checker and a semantic analysis phase to rule out programs that are not well typed. The big problem with doing this is that you actually eliminate some programs. So for example, I eliminated the program that was actually adding to the string. And why is that a problem? Well, it's possible that particular program was actually computing something useful, and maybe I can still compute that something useful through some other mechanism. Let's say, I wanted to find the length of the string, and there was a way to find the length of the string by, let's say, adding some number to that string, if that string is less than or equal to 4 bytes. And now that's not possible anymore. I can't write a program that's going to add and somehow figure out the length of the string. The only way I can do it is by maybe calling a function, or maybe looking at each of the characters separately or something like that. Now, it is possible that if I was allowed to add to the string, then the implementation could have been faster. But because I've been stopped from doing that, I have to go with a slower implementation. And so that is a con of using a type system. All right. So you eliminate potentially better optimized programs. I'm not saying that you eliminate programs altogether, right? So typically type systems will be built so that you can write any program, which is any program you want to write is still possible to write as a well-typed program. But you are still eliminating some programs which are catching the rare scenarios, and maybe those rare programs were actually optimized. Some of those rare programs were actually computing something useful and in a more optimized way than any well-typed program could compute. Okay, so that's the con, and you may imagine that you don't really care about this con, and that's why typing is such a popular idea. Most people won't really bother about this super optimized version of a program, and so they would just say, okay, we don't, it's much better to catch common mistakes than to actually do the best possible optimization. Okay, so here's some example, and so different programming languages actually take different trade-off points. So I've been using the example of a string representation, but here's a much more realistic example. And so different programming languages will take different trade-off points between correctness or checking of errors and or ease of programming and optimization. So for example, a functional programming language like OCaml, it supports immutable objects. So the idea is that you create an object using, let's say, the let construct or the var construct or something like that, and then using that construct you can define a variable, but once you have defined a variable, you find an object, you cannot change it, and these are immutable objects. You can use it any number of times, but you cannot actually change it. And that means if I want to make a change, so let's say I defined a list, then if I want to change the second element of that list, then I have to create a new list, right? And in that list I will basically copy all the remaining elements except the second element, and then that I'm going to change. And so to be able to change anything in a language that supports immutable objects and using only immutable operations, then I'll have to kind of do a lot of copying, and that would be much more expensive. That's a design choice that OCaml took. On the other hand, a language like C or C++ or Java, they support mutable objects, in which case, you can actually, the objects are typically mutable, which means I can go and change some object anywhere I like. Now, arguably, mutability gives you more power, and so it gives you better optimization, because the set of legal programs is now bigger. I can now change values, whereas immutable, if the language only supports immutable objects, then I won't be able to do that. So in that sense, the language, so the weaker type system, which is supporting mutability, is giving you better optimization. On the other hand, if you support mutability, the type of programs that you can write that contain errors increases, right? So there can be many types of errors that you can have, huge classes of errors that get introduced because of mutability that are just not present if everything was immutable. Okay, just another example, and just to say that different programming languages are taking different trade-off points, and this trade-off between correctness and optimization. Okay, the other question when we're talking about typing is when to check types. And one answer is never. So there are some languages that don't have any types whatsoever, and the assembly language, for example, can be thought of one such language, because even if it has types, it's a very, very minimal and rudimentary form of types. Mostly it has no typing whatsoever. So we're not going to check any types as long as other things are matching. We are fine. For example, parsing and scoping and things like that. The other type of languages are check types at compile time, and these are called statically typed languages, in contrast to dynamically typed languages which check types at runtime. Okay, so some languages check types at compile time, and some languages check types at runtime. For example, C, C++, Java, etc. are examples of languages that check types at compile time. What are some examples of languages that check types at runtime? Actually, Java is also an example of language that checks types at runtime. So some of the types it's able to check at compile time. Other types it's able to check only at runtime. For example, Java has a type called array, and you can say that something is an array of length, some defined length. So let's say an array of 100 elements. Now, it is usually not possible to check. So let's say I index into that array. So I say, let's say the array was A, and I say AI. So I want to index into the ith element of that particular array. Now, it's usually not possible to statically say that I is between 0 and 100 for sure. And so this operation would only be legal, would be well typed only if I is between 0 and 100, because if it's outside of 0 and 100, then it would be an ill-typed expression. And so something like this cannot be checked at compile time, and so it will check that at runtime. On the other hand, simple things like something is an integer or a string or a boolean or a floating point number, these things can be checked at compile time. So some languages take a pure compile time approach, some languages take a pure runtime approach, some languages take a hybrid approach, which is check some fragment of the language at compile time and other fragment of the language at runtime. So once again, the languages that check types at runtime are called dynamically typed languages. The languages that check types at compile time are called statically typed languages. And I would like to point out that when I use the example of an array of 100 elements, that's indeed a type, right? So I'm saying that this array is of length 100, and so any index that should go into it should be between 0 and 100, and that is also a part of the type system. Okay. Also, I would like to say that, for example, in C, do we have such a type system? So, for example, C also has the concept of arrays. So, C has a static type system. For example, int versus float versus other things, and then it also has it also has things like you shouldn't be indexing outside of an array, but it never checks that. So C takes another point in the trade-off space, because it checks some things at static compile time, which is exactly what Java also checks. Maybe some things here or there. But then Java also includes dynamic runtime type checks, whereas C does not include dynamic runtime type checks at all. So for things like array out of bounds, so whether AI is pointing within the bounds of A or not, it actually never checks that at all, and it just calls it undefined behavior. All right, so which basically means that if it's the programmer's responsibility to ensure that typing is not happening, but the C programming language will not give you any runtime mechanism or compile time mechanism to check these things for you. All right, so that's also a difference between C and Java. Java gives you runtime type checking even for array out of bounds and many other things, whereas C does not do any runtime type checking whatsoever. It's a purely statically typed language. It doesn't mean that it doesn't have runtime type errors, but it just kind of calls them undefined behavior, and which means that it puts the onus on the programmer to not have any runtime type errors. Okay. So often a combination is used, as we just discussed. Some properties are checked at compile time, for example, int versus float. Some properties are checked at runtime, for example, array out of bounds. And some properties are never checked, for example, array out of bounds in C. All right. And even in Java, you could argue that some properties are never checked, right? For example, maybe you wanted to check maybe you wanted a property that this function is sorting the array, and that's not a property that Java can check for you. That's something that is the programmer's responsibility. So the question is, how much of the correctness logic is basically the programmer's responsibility, and how much of it is being taken care of by dynamic runtime checks, and how much of it is being taken care of by static runtime checks. And the C's approach is that some things are being taken care of by the static runtime checks, other things are programmer's responsibility, but C doesn't do any dynamic runtime checks because it wants to have best performance. Java is doing all three, right? Some languages will only do dynamic runtime checks and programmer's responsibility. They'll do no static checks whatsoever. Different languages, different design decisions. So how does the programming language make these decisions? Why will I decide to use static versus dynamic typing? So here are some important advantages in green of static type checking. It catches errors early, right? So the error is caught at compile time, not at runtime, because at runtime you need to also supply the right input to be able to trigger that particular type error, whereas a static type checker will basically catch error right at compile time. So that's a very early stage. In fact, it can also catch errors at edit time if the compiler is built into the editor as part of your IDE. Most importantly, it has no runtime overhead whatsoever, and that's a very important thing. The biggest con of static type checking is that sometimes it is too restrictive. So for example, if I have something like, let's say, if some condition and I say x equals null, okay, and then I say, or let's say I say that x is an integer. Okay, so star x is some integer I. So I say int I, right? And else I can say star x equals string s. Now something like this is kind of permissible in a dynamically typed language, because we're basically saying, look, x can be either int or string. I don't really care. If it takes this particular path, then it's an int. If it takes that particular path, it's a string. And hopefully my program can deal with it. And anytime it's going to try to use x, it's going to first check whether it's a string or an int. And depending on that, it's going to do whatever it wants to do. That would be the dynamic type checking approach. However, a static type checking approach would say, oh, no, I see that on one path it's being given an int type, on the other path it's being given a string type. That's not permissible, and it will throw a type error. So typically, static type systems tend to be more restrictive than dynamic type systems, because they have to deal with all possibilities, whereas dynamic type system is only dealing with one of the possibilities, which is the possibility of the execution path. Okay, let's look at the dynamic type checking and its pros, which are written in green. So the biggest pro of dynamic type checking is that you can do more sophisticated checks at runtime. So there are some checks that are so difficult to do at compile time, and they're very much easier to do at runtime. And array out of bounds is one such check. So if there's an array and you want to check whether AI is a well-typed expression or not, most of the times you can only do it at runtime. It will be very hard to do something like that at compile time. And sometimes it's even impossible to do something like at compile time. Moreover, it is much less restrictive. All right. So yeah, we just took this example where we saw that static type system would not allow it, but dynamic type system, a dynamic typed language would allow this kind of a thing. Dynamic typing, so for this reason, because it is much less restrictive, dynamically typed languages actually are very popular for rapid prototyping. So there are many languages which are also popularly called scripting languages that would allow this kind of dynamic. So languages like Perl, for example, it's really easy to write programs there. You don't have to worry too much about typing rules, because as long as the program is dynamically well typed, which typically they are, assuming you're writing correct logic, then it's fine. And so it's very amenable to rapid prototyping, as opposed to statically typed languages where it's much, it's writing the same logic is more work. The biggest problem with dynamic type checking is the runtime cost that is a part of this kind of mechanism, because at runtime you have to keep checking types, and that definitely gives you a slowdown at runtime. Okay, there are some interesting ways or workarounds to avoid these trade-offs. And one of these, so I'm just using a couple of examples, interesting examples. One is escape mechanisms. So languages will give you type systems and type checking through semantic analysis, but sometimes it may happen that you want to deliberately subvert the type system because you want to have a more optimized program, maybe, or it's easier to write the program if you're able to subvert the type system. So to support something like that, languages would sometimes also support unsafe typecast. So for example, C would allow you to cast a pointer of one type to a pointer of another type and use it as such. And if you're doing something like that, then it's really the programmer's responsibility from there on to maintain and ensure correctness of his or her program. So escape mechanisms, this is an interesting and strange fact about programming languages, that while they provide typing, they typically also provide escape mechanisms, because if the programmer is 100% sure of what he or she is doing, then he can use the escape mechanism. Recall that typing is meant to catch errors, and if the programmer is sure that he's not making any error, then he can use the escape mechanism. The other interesting kind of fact about dynamically typed languages is that people often try to retrofit static type checking to dynamically typed languages. So for example, let's say I have an array A. So let me just say that there's an array A of size 100, right? And then I have a loop. I say for I equals 0 to 50. And then I say, I access AI. Now, in a dynamically typed language, every time I access AI, I would basically check whether I is between 0 and 100 or not. But it may be possible in this particular program that the compiler is able to see that I is actually coming from this for loop, and inside this for loop it's actually iterating from 0 to 50. And so if the compiler can reason about these things, then it can say, oh, I'm 100% sure that AI here is well typed because I will be between 0 and 50, and that is always less than 100, and so this is a well typed expression always, and so it can get rid of the runtime dynamic type checks. And so this is one way that people try to optimize dynamically typed languages by kind of identifying by trying to retrofit static type systems. This is almost like a static type system because I'm basically being able to say that I is between 0 and 50. So that's like a type of I, statically determined. And then I say AI is a well-typed expression, hence. And so I don't need a dynamic type check. And so using this, you can recover runtime performance by doing these static checks. And this also gives early feedback to the programmer. So just in case the programmer wants to make the entire program statically type checked in a dynamically typed language, then it can say, okay, please try to prove that everything is type correct at compile time. Now it may not be always possible, but if it is possible, then it would be able to flag errors to the user at compile time. So it gives you early feedback. But the most important thing is something like this is only best effort. I just said it is not always possible, but it may be possible in some cases. For example, it is possible in this particular example. So things like these usually require deep program analysis techniques, which are usually outside the purview of a typical compiler that needs to run very fast. But modern techniques to do this are fast becoming popular as well, and they can use static type systems. These modern techniques can enable expensive static compile time checks to check deep properties, including things like array out of bounds at compile time.